Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. And today things are going to get a little bit weird.
Yeah, I think weird is putting it mildly.
We're looking at some claims from Hakeem Ali Bokas Alexander,
All right.
and we've got his conversation transcript, some research, and it all kind of revolves around these ideas of like sentient planets and stars,
Okay.
humanity, as a harmful infestation on a living Earth.
Right.
And this organization called SPACE.
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 Right.
Yeah, the Sentient Protection Agency and Cosmic Embassy,
Yeah.
acting as like a go-between.
Okay, so right off the bat, we are in a very speculative realm here.
Yeah, our goal here is to kind of unpack these ideas and see how they stack up against what we know,
Right.
and get a handle on the different perspectives without getting too bogged down in the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of a sentient planet or a sentient star.
Right.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, so let's start there when we talk about sentience.
Well, the way we typically think about sentience is in terms of like feeling, perception, experience.
Right.
Having subjective experiences, consciousness goes a step further and implies self-awareness, complex thought, you know?
Being able to think about thinking.
Exactly. And then awareness is sort of like the most basic level, just perceiving the environment.
Right.
But the thing is, all of our current understanding of these concepts is rooted in biology.
Biology.
Yeah. Brains, nervous systems, we don't really have a framework for understanding sentience outside of that context.
So sentient planets and stars as we know them.
Yeah.
Zero scientific evidence. Like, it's a
Right.
very captivating idea. And we see it in fiction all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
You have philosophies like panpsychism,
Yeah.
which suggests that consciousness is kind of fundamental and everywhere, even in inanimate matter.
Like rocks and trees.
And stars.
Yeah.
There's even Dr. Matlock's idea of star consciousness.
Right.
But scientifically speaking,
Yeah.
nothing.
We're going based on how we understand the universe right now. Planets and stars form through these very basic physical processes. Gravity accretion, nuclear fusion. There's no known mechanism or biological structure that could support sentience as we understand it.
Right. Could there be other forms of sentience?
I mean, it's possible. It's
Yeah.
a huge universe. We don't know everything.
Yeah.
But we have no indication that there is.
So fascinating to think about, but firmly in the realm of speculation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Alexander also calls humanity a parasitic infestation harming a living Earth.
Right. Which brings up the Gaia hypothesis.
Gaia hypothesis, yeah.
So it's important to understand that Gaia is basically proposing that Earth is a self-regulating system
Right.
where life and the environment are constantly interacting and influencing each other.
Like a feedback loop.
Exactly. And the idea of what's called co-evolutionary Gaia is pretty well accepted in science.
Meaning,
That life and the environment have evolved together.
okay.
You know, they influence each other's evolution.
So they're co-evolving.
Right, exactly. Now, the more extreme version called optimizing Gaia, where Earth is like actively trying to create the perfect conditions for life.
So it has a goal.
Yeah, that one's a bit more debated.
Okay.
But even then, self-regulation doesn't necessarily equal conscious decision-making.
Right.
Like a thermostat can regulate temperature without being conscious.
Okay, so the parasite label, though.
Yeah.
Pretty strong stuff.
Definitely. And I think it's important to define what we mean by parasite.
Right.
Ecologically speaking, a parasite benefits by harming its host.
Okay.
And I mean, the sources are pretty clear that humanity is having a significant negative impact on Earth's ecosystems.
Right.
Deforestation, pollution, climate change, biodiversity loss.
And NASA has all this data.
Tons of it. You know,
Right.
satellite images showing the shrinking ice caps, the deforestation.
It's all there.
Yeah, so the parasite label, while provocative, is a pretty potent metaphor for our effect on the planet.
So Earth consciously protecting us, though.
I think that's more of a metaphorical interpretation of the Gaia hypothesis.
Okay.
Not a scientific reality within the theory itself.
So the headline for our listeners.
Okay.
Our impact is real.
Definitely.
It's raising huge ethical questions.
For sure.
But Earth's protection is not a conscious choice.
Not as far as we know.
All right, makes sense. Now, this organization, SPACE,
Yeah.
it sounds like straight out of science fiction.
It does. And it's interesting because this concept of a breakaway civilization,
What does that mean?
basically a secret advanced society that's broken away from mainstream human society.
Okay.
It exists in ufology and conspiracy theories.
Right.
But, I mean, it's a long shot to say the least.
Right.
There's this idea called the Silurian hypothesis.
I've never heard of that.
Basically, it points out how difficult it would be to detect evidence of even past advanced civilizations.
So they could have been here and we'd never know.
Exactly. And keeping something like that secret on a global scale with supposedly superior technology, I mean, that's a massive hurdle.
So what about space itself?
Yeah.
Is there any real-world basis for this organization?
Well, if we look at the evidence from our research, there's no credible mention of a sentient protection agency and cosmic embassy.
At all?
Not that we could find.
Wow.
SPACE is an acronym that NASA uses for a consortium, but it's focused on in-space manufacturing,
Okay.
technologies for building and assembling things in space.
Nothing like what's being described here.
Not even close. So as it's presented in our source material, space really falls into fringe theory territory.
Okay, bottom line for our listeners.
Space, as described, not a recognized entity.
Okay, fringe indeed. Now, why frame these claims as fiction?
Ah, that's a good question.
And what's the deal with the AI critique?
So framing something as fiction can be a strategic communication technique.
How so?
It allows you to gauge public reaction to these really out-there concepts without facing immediate dismissal.
Interesting.
It's acknowledging that there's going to be skepticism.
Which is healthy.
Absolutely. I mean, Carl Sagan famously said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right.
Sagan standard.
I like that the Sagan standard.
Has a nice ring to it.
And the speaker specifically mentions Google Gemini.
Right.
Like this AI.
Well, the key thing to remember here is that large language models like Gemini have known limitations.
Okay.
Biases, inaccuracies. They're trained on massive amounts of data, but that data can be flawed or incomplete.
Right.
So it's highly likely that Gemini would categorize these claims as fiction based on its training.
Okay. And then there's the talk about tachyon-based systems.
Right.
Faster than light travel.
Sounds pretty advanced.
Yeah.
So if we connect this to physics, tachyons are these hypothetical particles,
Hypotheticals.
meaning we haven't actually proven that they exist.
Okay.
They're interesting theoretically because they're predicted to always travel faster than light.
So break the laws of physics as we know them?
Well, potentially they could even mess with our understanding of cause and effect.
How so?
Well, if you can send information faster than light, you could theoretically send a message back in time.
Wow, so time travel.
Potentially, but again, purely theoretical.
Okay, so the takeaway here.
Tachyon-based technology is unproven.
Right.
Like, we haven't even proven tachyons themselves exist, let alone built technology using them.
Okay, so to kind of briefly touch on the ethics and the big picture of all this.
Oh.
You know, humanity as a parasite, sentient planets. What are the implications here?
Where I think it raises some really fundamental questions about our role in the universe and our responsibilities.
If we are having a parasitic effect on the planet.
Right. Then it forces us to really consider our ethical obligations to this planet.
And if celestial bodies were sentient?
I mean, that would completely change our human-centric view of intelligence.
You would turn everything on its head.
So these are profound questions to consider, even if the initial ideas aren't scientifically supported right now.
Yeah, for sure. So to wrap up, these ideas from Mr. Alexander are definitely mind-bending.
Yeah.
They touch on these really important aspects of our relationship with Earth, but they don't currently have scientific backing.
Right. They fall into the realm of fringe theories and speculation.
And remember, critical thinking is key.
Absolutely.
And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, the Sagan standard.
Always a good reminder.
Here's a final thought for our listeners.
Okay.
Considering our documented impact on Earth, regardless of whether it's a sentient being, what are our fundamental responsibilities as inhabitants of this planet and the cosmos?
That's a great question.
And what if these unconventional ideas, even without current proof, serve as valuable thought experiments for humanity's future and how we understand our place in the universe?
It's definitely something to think about.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
You got it.
Until next time.
See you then.